So right now I have Rhino open. If you want to follow along, have Rhino open. And then on box, there is this Frank's Rhino aliases.txt and the path with slope grasshopper file that you should download. Then also there is a textures folder right here, a zip file that you need to extract and put somewhere on your computer. So those are the two things you need to download. So the first thing I always recommend people do when they open Rhino is to type in purge in the command line, hit enter, and then basically you see here that you can remove things that you aren't using. And the one that you should have set to yes is layers. Layers equals yes, and hit enter, and then you see your layers panel on the right side clears up. The second thing is to set up a few useful keyboard aliases that will make modeling faster. If you go into your Rhino options, which you can get to by clicking on the little gear button there, and then you should see aliases in the Rhino options. If you choose import at the bottom, and then find that text file wherever it's located here, Frank's Rhino aliases, and just choose open, you should get what you see on the screen right now. Essentially, this library of keyboard shortcuts that I personally use when I'm modeling. And the ones that I created usually have two letters. You see like C, C, D, D, E, E, F, F. It's easy just to quickly double tap on two keys just with one finger and then hit enter to get access to that. And click OK. The other thing is to set up your middle mouse window of most useful buttons. So within Rhino, if you click your middle mouse button, you'll pull up this little window. As you get familiar with the tools you like to use the most in Rhino, dock this just like, here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna click on my middle mouse button, then choose this little light blue bar to kind of like keep that floating there. And then if there's a tool that you use a lot, like you find the button for that, and then you basically move that into here. So one of the tools that we're gonna talk about today is a tool called Arc Tangent. And that tool, if you go into the Curve Tools tab, you should be able to find it on the left side right here, Arc Tangent to Curves. If you hold Control key on your keyboard, you see that if you hover over it, it says Copy Link. Hold Control, and you can drag that into your little window there. So now whenever you open this, you see you have that Arc Tangent to Curves tool there. Then if you want to get rid of that out of your middle mouse button, you can always just hold shift, move that out, and it gets rid of that item. In Rhino, there are basically two things you do. You either draw or you 3D model. So one thing I want you all to begin to learn how to do, to try to draw your line work in such a way where you rely on precise, measured ways of drawing. You want to do this, which is you want to be able to draw using lines and arcs. So stick with the polyline tool. So let's start and choose the polyline tool and draw a simple line and end there. If you want to make a turn, you can either do this. You can either continue the rest of it and then fillet the curves later. So I set a alias for fillet to be FF. So I type in FF, then space, and you see now I have access to my fillet. And then the radius you can change here. Right now it's set to 5. Let's set it to 10. And then you can basically fillet the ends. You can see you can get that radius. Another tool, and this is why I asked you to bring this Arc Tangent to Curves button into your middle mouse button, is this is a really, really nice way to draw curved geometry in Rhino because it forces you to draw using arcs. So here's how this tool works. Just a simple line like this. And then I'm going to choose this Arc Tangent to Curves option, click on that. And then what you want to do is you want to click on the end of your first line, like so. You see what happens now is that like you're drawing curve that is always tangent to the line. So here's my process. Click on that button, Arc Tangent to Curves, choose the end, hit F on your keyboard, enter, click, click. I'll do it one more time. Choose the Arc Tangent to Curves, click on the end, hit F, click somewhere to represent the length of the arc, click, and then that's done. Now here's the beauty of this. You can do it again, and so you can choose that end there, F, click, click, F, click, click, F, click, click. And so you can see, begin the curve that we're drawing is a very logical curve. It's made up of arcs. And then at any point along this, you can go back to a simple straight line like this to extend that out like that. And then again, choose that option there. Click the end, F, click, click. And then if you want to actually turn this into a path, what I would do is I would select all the geometry there, join them by typing in J for join, hitting enter, and then just use offset, OO. enter allows me to click on one curve and then just offset it by a distance. As you get into this, you might want to build, say, a path that crosses the site. You offset that, begin to create a landscape design, but then you want to basically take all the points that are intersecting, type in TR for trim, and trim those interior spaces. Usually whenever you're drawing line work, you're going to want to clean up these corners. That's where you use the fillet tool. Obviously, you can just type in FF, and then you can choose, say, for instance, 1, 2, and you get a curve like that. Another thing you can do is you can select all your curves, hit J for join, then type in fillet corners, and then you can select all of them at once, enter, and then give it everything a consistent radius, let's say 3, and you see now all that is filleted at once. Another thing you can do, let me undo that. Again, I'm going to go back to this arcs tangent to curves tool. You can use that to also fillet curves tool here. So choose arc tangent to curves. And now you just ask yourself, where do I want the fillet to start? I want it to start here. So you kind of look at it and click, all right, I want to start there. Click there, hit F. And now you click and you've drawn that curve, and then just take that and you trim the end there. And then when you have a design sort of started, to begin to model this in 3D, you need to have what's called like closed geometry, because things in 3D need to be closed. So you see how the ends of the path are open? You need to close those first before you can actually model them in 3D. So I would go through here and I would just add a little cap to these. And then once you have this set up, the first step in modeling any 3D is use hatches and explodes. What I would typically do is I will create a new layer. I'll call this one hatch, and then make that the current layer. And then I'll type in hatch in the command line. And you want to make sure that boundary is set to yes. And then select the curves, hit enter, and then just click in the zones that you want to. Okay, so you see right there what happened. Let me undo that. Combined regions needs to be set to no, so that when you click adjacent regions, they don't overlap. And then you can hit enter, click OK. Now you've created a bunch of hatches for those regions. And then when you have your hatches made, what you do is you select your hatches, select objects, type in explode, and then they'll all turn into surfaces so that you have your surfaces in 3D. We're going to transition into a related topic, because we've been doing all this in flat surfaces, like everything's in 2D. To actually begin to move things in 3D, this is where the methods and tools that you have at your disposal get a lot more complicated. An easy way to work on your design in 3D and not get overwhelmed is to start with the most basic component of any landscape design, which is the walk. Essentially, a landscape project is a connected series of walks, paths, and areas that you're walking along. And that a lot of times can establish the framework for the entire project. So if you can model a walk in 3D, you actually can begin to model other things in 3D if you begin to start with that. That's why getting a simple plan drawn is a good starting point. So here's what we're going to show you how to do. I'm going to create a new layer. I'm just going to turn off everything for now. This is where that little Grasshopper script that I've given you comes into play. So I'm going to open Grasshopper. You can do that by typing in Grasshopper, and that opens up the green Grasshopper tool. And I've written a script for y'all, and it's called Path with Slope. Let's open that Path with Slope script. And what essentially all you need to know is that after you open this script in Grasshopper, if you zoom in using your middle scroll wheel, I've written the instructions for you so that you can just follow along that way. You don't need to understand what all of this stuff is. Here's the logic of this script. Minimize this. And here's what I want you to do. I'm going to go to a top view, and I want you to use the techniques I've just shared you to draw a path. Imagine that this is a path, and imagine that this path is going from a lower elevation to a higher elevation. And whenever we do grading plans, we try to make the path slope as consistent as we can. Everyone hopefully by now should know that a path is essentially rise over run. So what we're going to build into this curve here, imagine that this, let me just join everything, this is one curve. Build into this curve is every piece of information you need to project this into 3D. So right now, what we have is a line that gives me the length of it. Now we need to have the start elevation and the finish elevation. So here's what I'll do. I'll click on this curve. I'll type in PP. That brings in my points on so I can adjust the control points. And you just need to establish the start elevation and the end elevation, or essentially this elevation point here and that elevation point there. So I'm just going to take this one there and move it up. So now in Grasshopper, this is how the tool works. Let me park this to one side and then park this on the other side, then move this down so you can see. In Grasshopper, go to the blue box here, right click on curve, choose set multiple curves, or in this case, since I only have one curve, you can choose set one curve. Then click on the curve, and that's it. You see how that all of a sudden turned into a path in 3D with the start elevation and end elevation as your design. And then what's good about this script is that it gives you the actual slope that you've designed it to. So in this case is a 9.2% slope. So what I would do is I'll bring back my elevations there and I would move this down until I get this to a slope that is buildable or accessible, which should be 5% or less. So now in Grasshopper, just scroll all the way to the right to the red box and says here in Rhino, make sure that the layer you want to bake this line into is set as the current layer. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create a new layer in Rhino. I'll call this one Path Center Line. And I'll make the color like red or something. Then set it to be the current layer. So that requires you to double click into it so that you see the checkbox there, all right? Now in Grasshopper, click and highlight the component below, which is this one right here. Right click anywhere outside the component to bring up a menu. And then click on the bake button, click on that. And now you see in Rhino, there's a line there. In Grasshopper, there's different preview modes. So the preview modes are these little cylinders at the top right here. You see how right now it's set to this middle one. All you need to know is that to hide things, you just click on this one on the left. And now you see that the Grasshopper preview is now gone. So now essentially, think of it like this. One layer, in this case is layer 6, call this one line work. This one is your line work that you use to set the path. And then this one is your new path. Let me delete this. I'm going to show you that, in fact, you can do multiple paths at once. So we have these two here. So in Grasshopper, right click on this, set multiple curves. Now choose 2, hit enter. If you don't see anything, that's because the preview is off. So just click on the cylinder in the middle to get your previews on. Now you see you have these two paths that now go from this bottom to this top elevation there. Then you can go make sure that the layer you want to finalize, the line we're kind of set there, path center line. And then you can go here, right click, bake, and that's it. You created 2 center lines of your path in 3D that have these specific slopes. So let's turn this into a path. And so the easiest way to do that is to choose the single line tool. I would take that single line, now put it into your middle mouse shortcut window. You see I have it right there, a single line. The reason I like to use that tool is if I click on that, you can choose both sides. Then let's choose the end there. You see that you can draw the center line and you can kind of use your snapping to get this. So let's type in 5 to create a 5-foot on both sides. So this should be, if I type in length, that should be 10 feet. So let's do another 10-foot path there. So I'll type in this, click there, B for both sides, 5, click. Now you have your 10-foot path there. And then to get this to model, you type in sweep 1, click that, select rail, then select sweep shapes, hit enter. Check this option called road like, and then click OK. Let's do this one right here. Sweep 1, rail, line, enter, road like, click OK. And now you've basically modeled this path in 3D. And they're yellow because they're upside down. So if everything is yellow, just type in flip like so. The easiest way to understand if you've done it correctly is to cut contours through these curves. So what I'll do is I'll create a new layer called this contour. I'll select this surface and this surface. I'll type in contour. The base point will be basically 0, 0, 0, hit enter. And then to get the vertical line, an easy way to do that is to go to a front view, hold shift to kind of get a vertical line like so. And then right now the distance between contours is 1. So that's fine. I'll just hit enter. And then if I go back to perspective view, you see how these contours now, they run with the path. Essentially, you have now created a graded path with a consistent slope along the length of it. Now, let's say you want to close this loop that I've created there. You might want to take these 2 ends there. You can either just loft them. Let's just do that, just loft them. So I'll type in loft the end of this path with the end of that path to kind of create a simple connection between those two. We have this whole space in the middle, like we kind of basically create a boundary for that. And so let's do that. Let's draw a line here to create a boundary for that. And then we're going to get the edge of this internal boundary. So the way we can do that is type in dupe edge. So I'll type in dupe edge. And we'll grab the edge of this. We'll grab the edge of this. And also grab the edge of this. Enter, and then join them. So while they're still selected, I'll type in J for join. Then select this bottom curve there, J for join. Now we're going to turn that into a surface. And the easiest tool whenever you're dealing with closed curves is to use patch. So here's the way we do that. While it's still selected, I type in patch. and it brings up this option here. My recommendation is when you're using patch is to go into a top view and to make sure the top view is set to a wireframe visibility, because what you can do now is you can hit this preview button and you can see the resulting patch. And your goal is to make sure that the UV lines, the grid that you see here, just looks nice and square. So you need to adjust this U number and this V number. In V, instead of 10, I might set that to be 15, then hit preview. You see how it's getting a little bit tighter. Now we see like, oh, well, no, U needs to be tighter. So instead of 25, I might set it to be 30, hit preview. And then once you kind of get it square like, then you can adjust the precision of it. So right now it's 30 by 15, maybe like double it. So let's make the bottom 30, the top one 60. You see that you get a little bit more precision in that. Then you can click OK, and then you've created this surface in the middle. I'll click this, type in contour, choose that as my base point, choose that as the top one. Then you have essentially created those contours for that. Let's say you want to build a little amphitheater inside the middle of this space here. The first thing you need is a design. You need line work. You need a plan drawing for this. Let's do this. Let's do something like that. And then let's do something like that. Let's pretend like those are two areas that you want to model. I might take that curve there. And first thing I would do is I would project it onto this surface here. So I'll type in project these curves onto that to kind of get a projected curve there. You take that curve, and let's say you want to take this curve and you want to kind of begin to carve out like a space inside of that. You would have to take this and split that. So split this using that curve, and then that goes away. So now you have essentially like a space in there. And then let's do something similar with the top one. Let's project this curve up to that right there. In order to model this bottom section, you need to have a line. So we need to design that. So you need line work. So let's click on this here. And let's say, for instance, you want a slope to kind of start there. In this case here, I might suggest using network surface. So the way that works is you first have a start curve and an end curve, and then you would draw perpendicular slopes that represent the logic of this slope. Think of this as almost like a spider web. You can almost visualize the slope just by drawing these. Then what you do is you type in network surface, then just select all these curves that you've drawn. So curve 1, curve 2, and then all these middle curves like so. Now you've created essentially like this little amphitheater. If it's yellow, just flip it. Now that is one surface. So you want to make a little berm for this here. Again, I would probably use patch for this. So here's what I would do. Let me hide this. First thing I would do, you have your projected curve there, but then you also need kind of have like the top of this berm. So what I'll do is I'll take this curve here, I might offset it. So that is kind of like represents the top of the curve. Let me move it up a bit. Let's turn back on this here. So what we're going to do is we're going to use this as kind of like the top of the berm, so to speak, kind of like see if we can do something like that. And what we're going to do is we're going to use this curve and that curve to sort of model a little berm. So you can use the patch tool again. With those two curves select, I'll type in patch, go to the top view, preview. That one looks okay. Cut everything in half, preview. That looks okay. So now I'll choose okay. And now you've created a little berm that sits on top of that. And so I can unhide that, flip that, and then you're going to need to trim out the bottom of this. So what I'll do is I'll simply type in split this using the curve that we use and just delete that bottom there. Now you have 1, 2, 3, these things here. Now you can, so I'll type in contour. And then you have the start of an interesting landform that you can use for your project. And then as you get your contour plan figured out, I would do this to just kind of get things cleaned up. I would join all your lines together and then try to fillet the corners of contours as much as possible. Choose the ones that you want to fillet to kind of create a more organic form and shape to your design. There are a few really simple modeling tools that everyone should just have in their toolkit. Extrude this, you need to basically have this as a closed geometry. So again, close ends so that that thing's open. And then you can type in extrude curve. And then you can extrude this to a bench height, which should be 1.5 feet. And then make sure that solid is set to yes. And then just do 1.5 again. Now you've essentially created a simple bench. Another thing you can do is you can use a tool called Sweep 2. And so here's what that works. 2 lines, 1, 2. These are 2 curves. And then what I'll do is I'll take one end, type in extrude curve. And then we're going to use this plane here to draw ourselves a profile for a bench. So let's click on this here. And you remember that C-plane tool? Type in C-plane. And then what we'll do is we'll choose surface, click on this, and then just click anywhere. Now the C-plane is now set to that surface. And now what I'll do, I will draw, starting the endpoint there, a bench profile. And then I'll take this, type in close curve to kind of create that base to it. Now I'll do sweep to first rail, second rail, sweep shape, hit enter, enter again, and then maintain height is checked, then choose OK. Now you've kind of created more of an architectural bench. And if the ends are open, you can just click on that and type in cap. That closes those ends like that. Let's say you have the wall of your pump house and you want to model like a opening or a window inside of this. What you do is you model a geometry that you use as, let's call it, think of it almost like a cookie cutter. This represents, say, for instance, the opening that you want to cut through it. Type in Boolean, and then you have all these Boolean options. Click Boolean difference, choose objects to subtract from. I'm going to subtract from this, enter to continue. Subtract with this, enter to continue. You can now get rid of this guy. There it is, a window. Another thing you can do is do Boolean two objects and choose two objects to Boolean. And then what's going to ask you to do is just click. You can iterate through all like the potential ways that two objects can subtract from one another. And once you get the one you like, let's say the window, you hit enter to accept, and then you've done it. Boolean two objects, 1, 2, click, 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 create a little bench that looks like this using the Boolean. Let's bring up this design here that we've modeled. You create layers for each material. If you have a concrete layer, all objects that are in your site that are concrete, you put into that layer. So let's do that. Let me create a layer and I'll call this one concrete. I'll create another layer. I'll call this one grass. So then what you do is you just simply take the objects that are of a certain material. Let's say this is all grass right here. Go to the grass layer, right click on that, and then choose change object layer. Then choose this guy here, set that to be concrete layer. So right click on concrete, change object layer. So you click on that material button and you bring up this material editor. And so what you do is you're going to create your new material that represents this layer's content. So the way we do that is you first go to the type, expand that, and then choose custom name. Now give that a name. So since we're dealing with the concrete layer, we'll call this one concrete 1. And then you go down to this color, click on the 3 little dots. And now this is why I told you to download that texture folder. So let's pick one of the concrete textures. And in this case, I'm going to choose this B02. Open and choose OK. And you sort of see what happened now. If you are in a view in Rhino, let's say shaded view technically should not show textures. So if you want to show textures in a view, you have to make sure that the display options, that the shading settings right here, color and material usage, that is set to rendering material. Now you're looking at this and you're saying stuff like that looks weird. This is where you need to apply a texture projection on there. So here's how we do that. I'm going to click on this surface here. I'm going to go to the properties. I'm going to go to this texture mapping button there. We're going to choose one of two options, either planar mapping, this one right here, or box mapping. So in this case, we'll just choose the planar mapping. So I'll choose that. I'll go to a top view. And then what you're going to draw is a little box. And this box represents the tile of the texture. When you click that, just choose UV. Let me go to shaded in the top view here. And now you see what happened is now the texture looks correct. It looks like it's actually a texture. And the way that you understand how this works is if I click on the object in Rhino and I choose this show mapping button right there, you see this little box that we just created? If I move it, you see how the texture follows that box? If I scale it, see how the texture scales with it? Now, remember how I forgot to set these surfaces to be set to that concrete layer? Here's the fun thing. You can model things, and then as you begin to move things to those layers, so I'm going to right click on this, choose change object layer. You see how those now, once I move them to that layer, they now inherit that texture. So to match the texture map of this, you simply select these objects, go to the material editor, go to that texture mapping button, and then you see right here, there's this little brush match mapping. You click on that, then you click on what you want to match, bada bing, bada boom, and then you have the textures all kind of consistent across the whole thing. What we're going to do now is we're going to show how you might approach a very simple modeling of a proposal. So to start, hopefully all of you have a model, whether it's your section perspective. So what I have here is I just simply imagine that you would design an accessible path starting at the top of the levee wall with a 5% ramp with one landing and another 5% ramp down to this landing here. Also, one thing before we model is you see how I drew this boundary around the design. Something you also need to have with any grading plan, which is called the grading extents. Where does your proposed project start and where does the existing come back? Inside this boundary, it's going to be all graded. Outside of that line is going to be existing context. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lock the mesh that I have here. You see that I have the line work sort of projected to the top of, in this case, this berm here. First thing we'll do is we'll take, let's say, for instance, this landing here, and I calculated the 5% slope for this length here to be negative 7.1 feet. So I'm just going to move that down negative 7.1. So that's down at the elevation that needs to be. And then this here, this is the last landing right there. We'll take that, and this should be negative 17.75. So I'll move that negative 17.725. So now that is down. You can see it's almost close to the elevation there. So what we're going to do, I'm going to take the center line of the path that we've modeled, and then we're going to use that Grasshopper script. So I'm going to open Grasshopper, path with slope. And then what we'll do is take this here and establish the start and end elevation. So if you type in PP, you can get the control points, and I'll take one of the control points and project that to be the elevation of that right there. So set point, which is SS for me. Okay. And now that's there. I was also going to project the spot elevation down there as well. We're going to take this line here, project that down to that elevation there, and then take this elevation here, SS, project that there, and do that as well. So see, this is what we've set up. We've set up essentially the center line, which is this. Let me hide these other lines, which are getting a little confusing for now. You see, we've set up is essentially this framework where you have the top of the path, you have the landing, and then the walk, and then the walk, right? And then we'll take these two curves and we use the Grasshopper script to kind of even out the slopes. So in Grasshopper, right click on this, set multiple curves, choose this guy, and then hit enter. And you see now we've created these two slopes that are 5%. So now we have these two 5% slopes. Now we can take these new curves. I will create a new layer. Let's call it LSP3D. Set that to be the current layer. Then roll over to this side of the script. Remember these instructions. Click on it, right click, bake, as long as that's set to be the current layer. And then you've finished the use of that portion of the script. So now we can take these lines that we used as a guideline. We don't need them anymore, so I'll just hide them. Now you can take this, and you can begin to model the actual path itself. So in this case, what I did was I modeled these as 6 feet wide paths, clicked on the line tool, single line, and I simply started at an endpoint there. And then you choose both sides, hit 3, that 6 foot width there. We'll do the exact same thing for this next ramp right here, the single line option, click on the end, and then both sides. Let's hit 3 again. And now that is that line there. Now we use our sweep. So sweep 1, select rail, select check road like. Okay. So now that should be flat. Let's do it again. Sweep, rail, edge, road like. Okay. Now flip that. And so now this end here, as I was saying, needs to close that. So let's draw a line there, and then we'll just select these curves and then hatch that, explode that. So now we have the framework for the path modeled. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn the mesh back on, because now what we need to do is we need to use that grading extents that we've created, and we need to essentially create an opening in the mesh so that we can model everything in between the existing condition and the proposed condition. So here's what I'll do. Let me hide the mesh again. I'm going to select all the lines that I know will be used to create that. I will use hatch explode to kind of create that boundary. So I'm creating a new layer just for this reason alone. I will select the curves that represent that grading extents. I'll type in hatch, select inside there. You see now that because I select all the objects that represent that boundary, you can create a hatch of this whole zone. Enter, enter. And now you have this boundary, explode that. This you need to turn into a border. So we'll type in duplicate border. And now that is all you need. If I delete that line now, so now turn the mesh back on, and now I'm going to take this line, I'm going to extrude it. So type in extrude curve, and we're creating a cookie cutter. What we do now is we'll type in mesh split object to split would be the mesh right here. Enter. Cutting objects, which is this. Enter. And if you did it correctly, you now should be able to select what was inside that shape there. So now we don't need this cookie cutter anymore. We just now need to take that mesh. I will create a new layer, call it like mesh hide, then take that object there and change it to mesh hide and hide that. So now this is your task. Your task now is to model everything in between existing condition and proposed condition. So a good starting point when you're at this stage is to get a boundary of that here. So here's what I'll do. I'll take the mesh hide. I'll set mesh LSP3D to be the current layer. I'll take this mesh that I've hidden and just type in duplicate border. And so now I get the border of that. And now you have the start. So essentially this is the project. As long as you can model everything in between your design and the existing condition, you have the ability to come up with your design. So at this point, all I can say is that there is no one solution. It's just mixing and matching all the modeling techniques that you've learned up to this point. So I am just going to freestyle it. Let's start at the top and kind of figure it out. How can we do this? So right now we have this curve here and we have this edge there. So what I might say is like break it down into sections. Let's model just this side of the slope right there. So my recommendation is always draw lines that will help you figure out the logic of this. So what I'll do is I take that, I just drew a line there, and I'm just going to take that line, I'll type in split. So you can split this using this. So now I have this top curve, and then we'll get that side there. So duplicate edge to get that edge there. So now you have two curves here that you can use to model that surface. One thing I would do before you get too far is see how this curve actually has a lot of detail in it. It might be worth it to simplify it. So I'll just type in rebuild. And right now it has 139 vertices. I might reduce that to 30. And then you can take that. In this case, we'll do sweep 2. 1, 2, and then our sweep shape is this guy. So now we have that side there. Now let's take a look at this little corner right here. So I'll take this shape here, split that using that curve. So let's try network surface. 1, 2, 3, 4. That seemed to work. So I might split this into a couple of segments there as well. Split this with that, rebuild that. See if you can get it simpler. And now network surface, 1, 2, 3, 4. I'll take this line, I'll split that using these two curves there. Split this up into that right there. And then I'll take this here, split that. Now let's try network surface with this segment here. And then we'll take care of this segment here. So again, this area here, that's going to be one network surface. But in this case, I'm going to draw helper curves. Do we have an edge there? I might need to duplicate edge. So now we do network surface. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Lovely. This area right here, there's an area here where I didn't quite get this path to meet existing grade perfectly. So here's one thing I might do here. I'm going to use a technique, which is to modify the endpoints of a surface. So just bear with me. What I'm going to do is this. Duplicate border, delete the original, take this here, planar surface, and that's a new surface there. Now, if you choose this, you can go to the solid tools tab at the top, and then there is this turn on solid control points. Click on that, you see these little endpoints of the surface there. You can take that now, and you can use set point, and just set it to be at the elevation that meets existing grade. Let's split this curve using this surface here. Let's see if that will work. So split this using this. So we'll now do duplicate edge, edge that, take those two, join those, join to that, and then patch. You go to a top view, go to a wireframe, hit preview to see the result, and then just make this look as square as you can. So right now it's 30 by 30. So let's turn that to 20, preview. It's getting better. Let's make it 15, preview, and make it 17. Yeah, squarish. There we go. So now you've created that section there. Let's draw a line that goes from there to there. And here's one thing that you can keep in mind is that this line doesn't have to be straight. So let's try something there. Let's do something. So I'm going to extrude that so that we create a vertical plane. I'm not typing C plane, then choose surface, then choose that surface there, and then just kind of create a little drawing plane right on that line that we drew there. Now I'm going to draw point starting there, hold shift to draw a straight line, draw a slope, then go to the end there, and I'll kind of create this little gradual shape. Might fillet those ends, so type in fillet, type in 5, doink, doink. Maybe get a 9 here, doink, doink. Then C-plane, world, top. Let's duplicate edge, 1, 2, and duplicate edge, 1, then duplicate this edge there. Let's try that. Let's see how that looks. Network surface, then go 1, 2, 3, 4, network surface. Let's see how we can do this. This area here, this feels like this whole zone probably could be like one patch in of itself. And then this could be lofted between that end and that end. And then this could be another patch there. So let's grab this line here and let's draw an end to that there. And let's draw an end to that there. Maybe instead of this being like that, let's rebuild this using 5 points, and then just kind of take these and kind of create a little bit of an arc. So that's kind of matches the shape. Now let's take this end here, split that using this and this. So now we have this as one area. So let's take that. Also take this line here, split that. So double split that using these 2 lines there. So now we have that. Join those. Take this edge here, split that using this. So now we have that, join those, get that edge there, duplicate edge. So now I click that and that, join those, patch. Let's go to top view, preview. Let's make that 45. That looks good to me. All right. Now let's take care of this guy here. This here, we can probably get this line again. And then we'll take that, and that, join those. And let's just do patch. I'm lazy now. I'll just do patch. Preview. So in this case, we need to increase the V by a few more. That's okay. Join to that, join, patch. So now you have your finished grade. And now you add materials. So this is where I told you to create those layers. So in this case, we just have 2 materials, surface and planting. So I'll create a new one called walk, a new one called planting for walk. We will set that to be a custom color and just choose like a paved material like that. Call this one concrete paving. Click OK. Then change all these surface layers to be that change. Then the next one here, choose that. Let's call this one planting, and then create a custom color, and then find let's for now just do a grass. Again, you're going to put planting in Twinmotion later. So just choose something that is a little bit, simple, and then choose OK. And then change all these other layers to be that material, change object layer. So now I have that there. And then select objects. Make sure you do that texture mapping thing. So I'll go to top view, shaded. Remember, we go to material or objects, and then do texture mapping, and then choose, since this one here kind of is a weird condition where it's on a slope base, planar mapping should be fine. So I'll just do planar mapping, then just draw a box, hit UV, and then that should basically do it. And then for the walk, do the exact same thing. Select objects, go to the texture mapping, planar mapping, go to top view, draw a box, UV. So then that's there. And then last but not least, to look professional, you create a grading plan. So you just create a new layer, call it contour, select everything, just contour, go to a front view, let's start here, vertical 1, and then if you go to like a rendered view, it should look somewhat cohesive and consistent now. But you can see now that's how you can begin to create a cohesive design. But now I can see how the design feels like it's part of the actual landscape. So that's today's tutorial. Thank you all for joining. Hopefully you take this and use this as inspiration for how you can take your design and build your own version of this in 3D. So thank you all, and I'll see you guys soon.